Procrastination is a signal. The truth is there is limited time, but we all prioritize based on what we decide matters for us. And when you're enthusiastic about something or when you have no choice about something, you make the time. The minute that your response is, I don't have the time, what you're telling me is this is not a priority.
Welcome back to the Meg and Amy show. Hey, Meg, how are you doing?
Hey, Amy. Well, it's a sunny day, so I imagine you're doing well.
Yeah. Always good. Always a good thing. Hey, so we've got some exciting news in our industry these days. A couple months ago, we had NovaWorks coming out of Stealth, which was our first agentic HR platform solution, which of course you are on the board for.
Exactly.
And then more recently, we had SOL come out of Stealth, which is another agentic HR platform solution. Led by a group of former Workdayers, some of my former colleagues. What do you think about this? This is a whole new beginning in the HR tech space, I would say.
Yeah, I've been obviously taking a gander at some of the agentic solutions in the CRM space. I'm actually super excited to see this. It's such a great moment. So in a similar way, when Workday was first founded and the energy was around SaaS and cloud, it was sort of an obvious, yes, that needs to happen. And I feel the same way about agentic HCM solutions. Yes, that needs to happen. And also in a similar way, it's unclear exactly how that trajectory of adoption goes and also readiness of both the market and the customers. But what I can feel in my soul is that the truth is work is changing sufficiently. The componentry of work, the needs of workers, it's changing in such a way that the architectural models of the past are going to become brittle and harder to deal with over time. And so I'm excited to see this next phase happen. And it's certainly great to be part of it personally. But I think for the market, it's a good thing.
Yeah, these are two monumental introductions of products because these are not add-ons. This is replacing the core system of record. And so that's a huge undertaking. And as we've discussed on the show, it's not just a matter of building something, it's about maintaining it and building things like payroll, which isn't your first thing that comes to mind when you're like, hey, I'm going to build an HR agentic system, but it's the reality. So it takes a lot of wherewithal, and I'm really excited and proud of and eager to see these teams succeed.
I think they're both really outstanding. The people taking this charge are experienced and know what they're doing. And I think that is also the difference. It's a monumental vision and mission. I'm excited. Yeah.
Well, so you mentioned something which I thought was kind of interesting is when we're introducing these agentic AI solutions, it's when we introduce SaaS or when we've introduced a new phase of software. And something that you've mentioned before, Meg, is that AI isn't really just a tool, it's resetting the entire software lifecycle. We're starting at the very beginning again, and you've been calling it the EDS theory. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So obviously, this is even before my time, just in case people are like, hey, I have no idea what you're talking about. Don't worry. This is definitely before Amy and my time as well. But in the early days of software, EDS made a mark for itself, and it was started by a quirky founder, Ross Perot. Most people our age might remember when he ran for president with his flip cards and
his big Texas ants.
Exactly. The Saturday Night Live Dana Carvey piece was always big. He was an IBM salesperson. He recognized that IBM had this cool tech, but it was big mainframes, and that most companies didn't know how to make use of them. That is where I see the similar pattern. We have this great tech with AI. Companies are eager to get value from that. But after that, there's just a pretty murky, do I know what to do? What matters? What doesn't matter? The path of EDS was very much rolling up your sleeves, getting the people going in and building bespoke systems that could leverage the IBM technology. And he recognized a need in the market, and he went out and he sold big projects like Medicaid implementation, did big payroll systems, things for very big companies to get value. And then the beginnings of the package software started to come to life. And this is where we started to go into the custom off-the-shelf software, where a single vendor would build with an intention that that could be sold to multiple companies. And then, of course, most of us picked up the journey with the next iteration, with the Workdays and the SaaSes, where instead of delivering the software to the customer to implement and to run, in the SaaS world, we ran it on your behalf, and you were just responsible for how you used it.
And so it was even more packaged. It went from free for all and the version of forward deploy engineers at the time to then packaged software, but with high customization and still a lot of implementation consultants doing code, and then onto even more packaged, more standardized.
Exactly.
And now what you're saying is we're starting all the way at the beginning. Not even like we're going back to when SaaS was introduced. We're going all the way back to the very beginning.
It does feel that way to me. Now, of course, it's not a universal model because things have adapted and changed a little bit. So we are seeing some play at every level. But what I'm recognizing is that there is still a lot of energy for companies to figure out with the technologists for things that matter directly for them. And I suspect that we'll probably see an accelerated lifecycle arc of this. So the question that really lives for the market is, where is the value capture and where is the repeatability? And I think we're in the early days where the answer is going to be it depends for a while. But I think it's helpful to recognize there's these different channels, and it's probably useful to pick a lane and then to figure out what is your operating model and your business model to support that lane. Because I think that there is going to be a place for each of those.
What are the channels that you're seeing?
There's going to be some channels that look very much like EDS. You just go and roll up your sleeves and build it custom for the customer. I think we're going to see more of this because of the cost of tokens. And so companies are going to try to bring maybe open source foundation models into their own environment, or maybe they're going to be okay with using a commercial foundation model, but building their own IP on top of it that is special to them. And then I think you're going to see what we would think of as enterprise software type solutions that are trying to sell to either a broader market or a specific industry vertical or whatever. There's going to be some of each of these types of deliveries. And it isn't really clear to me if we end up accelerating that life cycle that took us, 40 years last time, or if we're going to come to a moment where we actually find reasons to have all of them.
So kind of applying that thinking in terms of these two new companies that we just talked about, what would your advice be to them?
Well, both of the companies, to my best understanding, are making the bet that we are accelerating to get to something that has all of the benefit of the agentic, but is delivered in a similar fashion as SaaS. Being able to build a solution that will satisfy and serve a large number of customers with a single sort of set of capabilities. That's my understanding right now.
But at the same time, being able to have the configuration or customization, or however you want to call it, is how you're making it work for you and having that be a lot easier and more dynamic. The other question is, what is the role of forward deploy engineers, or, kind of that model for these kinds of solutions?
The way I see it is, because we're in this sort of hybrid world of builder user, I think we're getting a little bit confused along the way. I think there is still going to be solutions that I use either in my role or in my function that are built by someone else. There's going to be some functions that I just want to have an interaction model that is more modern and works, but solves the problem more interestingly. I don't know how much I'm going to personalize my banking software, for example, but I'll probably clean up the interaction model where I find it annoying and maybe get it to be more tailored to responding to my needs and all of that. But I'm not going to change the core engine of how the banking process works, because that's owned by my bank. I see these solutions in a similar way. Where I believe the future is, from an HR system point of view, is to have more awareness of who I am, such that you can not only solve the HR tasks, but also the work enablement, helping me to have all of the tools I need, not just the ones that are owned by HR, available to me and tailored to how I work. Do I need it pushed to me? Do I want to pull it? Do I want it visualized? Do I want it interactive? All of that. And so the agentic systems, having the ability for these agents to be aware of who I am, aware of my work style, aware of my work needs, and allow me to interact with them in that way, is how I see most people will find value in these agentic systems, not rebuilding the core of how the back office lives, nor even necessarily the rules of work. It's just going to help make those available to me and understood by me in that moment when I'm doing that job.
To be a little contrarian, for example, Workday was built on the foundation of a workflow engine. That was one of its key characteristics. That workflow engine has lasted a really long time. However, it does require quite a bit of configuration. And if at the same time we're talking about like workflows changing dramatically because of AI and because of all of the opportunities, there's a lot of configuration needs and changes and understanding that wouldn't really be possible, I would say, in the current platforms.
That's right.
And so that's another thing I think that's going to be really key to agentic solutions, is just how easy it is to construct a workflow and how easy it is to iterate on it, how easy it is to change it, how easy it is to observe what's actually the work that's happening. That's another key part of what I would be looking for in these solutions. And that is, to start with, going to require a lot of help and not necessarily be out of the box.
Yes. I completely agree there. So now you're talking about both implementation and the business understanding and mapping that within these systems. 100% I agree. And I do think it's an architectural problem first and foremost, which is why I think there is a need for a new foundation, because architecturally it's the fluidity is one part of the problem. The clarity of how the work happens is another part of the problem. And to your other point, the context and the ability for the context to evolve, not just the context of the HR systems, but the context of the work, which again, I think is a different lens than what we built HR systems to do in the past, where at the core, even though we were building HR systems to care about and support people, we were building them with the belief that the foundational architecture of work and the foundational structure of the HR role were static. And those two things aren't true anymore. And so that's why it's an architectural problem. And so, yes, I think building these systems is going to require some iteration and clarity about where does work go and how do we build that flexibility in.
Oh, well, one other thing I think we should say about these two companies that have just come out of stealth is that they are both founded by women.
That's right. That's right. Go team.
Yeah, we've got Kelly Stephen Weiss, CEO and founder of NovaWorks, and Erin Yang, who is a co-founder of SOL, two lovely women that we know.
That's right. That's right. Well done, ladies.
Well done, ladies. And you wonderful gentlemen, too.
Exactly.
Yeah. Our overarching theme of this episode is about making sense of these crazy times. I wanted to talk a little bit more, Meg, about this concept of sense-making. You wrote about it in your newsletter, issue 21, Coming
My Drinking Age newsletter, yes.
So why don't you walk us through what you're thinking about with regards to sense-making?
The reason that I'm so drawn to this concept of sense-making, especially in this moment, is that, as we've talked about several times, this is a very vulnerable moment for leaders who are used to knowing what the future holds, or knowing what their plan is, or knowing how to progress. A big part of a leader's job is sense-making, but typically the way most leaders do sense-making is apply patterns and expertise and experience and then communicate to people what those things mean. And in this moment, there's a lot of unknowns, and so some of that pattern matching doesn't really work. We're seeing a bigger gap in the sense-making, and the way that I'm observing this gap isn't just the anxiety and angst. We're starting to see the blowback about AI because the behaviors have been a lot of ready, fire, aim. Lay off people. Let's turn on monitoring to see what people do and then hand that to agents. Let's create these game mechanics requiring people to maximize tokens or show commitment or give loyalty oaths or whatever it is that we're doing to try to show that we are taking the AI opportunity seriously, either as an industry or as an organization. And that has created a lot of anxiety and angst, a lot of negativity, and a huge amount of dysregulation in so many people. And so I'm recognizing that this is a leadership gap. The leadership gap is sense-making. It is a job of a leader to help the people in their care understand what is expected of them. And when leaders themselves have struggle with wayfinding, it becomes difficult for them to do that job well, because for most leaders, the answer is not sure. And so it's very top of mind that we need sense-making more than ever before. All of us need to understand where we fit. And this is at a moment where most people's tools that they use for sense-making are not applicable or not working in the way they used to work. This is where it gets at both my heart and my intellect that we've got to turn this around a little bit.
I was reading an article that Heather Bussing shared today about worrying about things that you can't control or that are far away from you is not the natural order of things because evolutionarily speaking, we were in small tribes and we had a small set of worries and we didn't really know everything that was going on. And now nothing could be further from the truth. And so there's just so much noise, so many worries that flood people's sense of self and the world. But it also just gave some practical things of, worry about what's in front of you, worry about what you can control, and let go of everything else. And I thought that was a really good reminder and an important part of this. It's not the only part of it because, of course, there is a skill to develop. There are naps that you need to have. There's grace that you need to give yourself. But I think a lot can probably be boiled down to, worry about what's in front of you and you can control to at least lessen the blast radius of all of the FUD and fears and anxieties that you can have.
There's a joke on Twitter that we're all exhausted from monitoring the situation. And the truth is that's an escalating worry cycle. It draws you in such a way. So obviously, wisdom, Heather Bussing is nothing if not wise. She's also official photographer of the Meg and Amy show. We should make that point as well. There's a lot of power in the story that you tell yourself as well. Investing time to tell yourself a different story, one that gives you a little bit more empowerment, one that helps put you in a more desirable mental space, I think is also very important because, again, when we talk about this, the importance of mindset, it's not just openness to new things. It's also the mindset about how do you see yourself in this moment and where do you see how you can contribute and what you can do and what's in your control and all of these things. And I think asking the question of, am I telling myself the right story is really powerful, is a path to navigating, but also giving yourself the tools to find the way out, which is, again, back to my point of sensemaking. Leaders have more tools at their disposal. They just have to be willing to use them. And one of the biggest tools you have at your disposal is talking to the people that are doing the work. Spend some time getting curious, not just about what you think you know and what you don't, but also where are the possibilities and the opportunities that can line up both what you're trying to do as an organization and where people are feeling stuck or having needs.
Yeah. And a few weeks back on our last solo show, I introduced this concept of the golden job, which I call the translator. The key skills for that person are, AI curiosity, really digging in and being willing to understand what's happening with AI, which takes a lot of effort. Domain experience, which is probably the easiest thing for people to tap into, at least those that have been around a while. And then business and market understanding, really having that context, which has always been something that we have recommended to people, that they be able to connect their domain experience to what really matters to the business, but now layering in that AI curiosity as well to be able to translate, okay, here's what we used to do and here's what we can do going forward. But recently, Meg, we brought our show on the road to HR West. Thanks so much to Debbie McGrath for inviting us to bring our show on the road. And it was so fun to see people put everything up on LinkedIn. Anyway, I put together a slide with this golden job, and our friend Jason Averbook, who we had join us on stage as well, mentioned, hey, what you're forgetting here, Amy, is taste and judgment, because those things are, you can't just have all these things and then suddenly be able to translate. You need to have some capability to actually do it. And he said taste and judgment, which of course we blew up with Jaya's article a few weeks back. And I was realizing as I was reading your newsletter Meg, that what was actually missing is sensemaking. And I think that really captures it. So it's not enough to just dig into AI and know your stuff in procurement or whatever, and know that the business needs X, Y, and Z. But you also need to have that sense-making ability. And that is going to require skills. It's going to require regulating your nervous system and maybe a nap or two, per David Blake.
Exactly. So what I love about David's point, you do need to know yourself. You need to know when you're starting to spiral, when you're starting to worry, when it's getting away from you, and to figure out paths to break that cycle. There's a Trevor Noah clip where he's like, before you freak out, like, ask yourself, did you eat? Did you sleep? Are you hydrated? David pointed us to naps. If sleep is the gap, if in my case, did you eat is a big one. If I start to crash from my blood sugar, all of a sudden things just get really hard and I get really cranky.
I can attest to that.
Yeah. So exactly. So remind yourself of your humanness first, and then dig back in and ask, what story can I tell myself about my agency? And then how do I turn that into this translator opportunity so that I can become something that's pivotal to the organization, and I can help everyone around me feel more empowered and more confident about where we're going. So this is a renewable resource that you're pointing out, Amy. Each of us can contribute to this in a way that not only helps our own self-regulation, not only creates opportunities for us, but it can also make things better for those around us, because this need is universal right now. And the more that we have the collective wisdom and brain power working on finding a path forward, the better we're going to do.
So zooming in a little bit on the AI curiosity piece, what this does mean is that you really need to start thinking about yourself as a builder. This is something that is really going to spark joy, ultimately. The building is great. Maintaining, not so fun. But you can build and have a great time. But in doing so, that has a cost to it, obviously time and effort, but also token spending. So I was thinking we could also do a little bit of making sense of how to build and in what way. And I've been digging into this quite a bit, Meg. You have shared in the past this concept of token budgeting at an enterprise level. I started down the journey of a personal complement. How do I manage my own token budget? And so I put a little something together, and I thought we could take a look at it. And I will give you kind of my state of the union, and maybe you can weigh in as well. What do you think about that?
I am just loving this Amy Wilson coming up with visual and information and frameworks. It's very helpful.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad I can be useful.
Totally. So anyway, yes, take us through your thinking.
Well, first off, I want to acknowledge that there are models other than Claude out there. And if you're really advanced, like our friend Ankur, who we had on the show recently, and Han Yuan, they're using, multiple models at once. So this is for more of the intermediate users.
Yeah, even though Amy has a dark factory going on, you don't have the other models testing everything. Yeah.
Exactly. So this is based on Claude, and this is a lot of kind of like pressure testing that I've been doing and trying to kind of figure things out. In light of the Fable model recently coming out and then being pulled, basically, let's take a look at Claude. Okay, so first off, the Claude desktop is the place to go. The desktop capabilities, including CoWork, as well as Claude Code on desktop. And that is where you just start to get so much more power than just staying on the web browser. So the desktop app, you get to bring in connectors, you get to have everything all in one place. I've identified 2 gears for myself. There's the standard one, and then there's when I'm bursting. When I'm in standard mode, I'm just doing my regular M&A show workflow. I'm using a lot of Claude, but it's not crazy. But when I get into like a big build mode and I've got like 5 or 6 things going at once, like that's a burst. There's 2 plans that I think are worth really understanding. There's the Pro mode, which is $20 a month, and then there's the Max at 5x, which is $100 a month. Now there's also a Max 20x, which is $200 a month. But honestly, that is really only if you are a super advanced builder. So for me, what I have settled on is the Max 5x plan. And basically, I use Opus generally by default. And with the burst, that's when I really need to discipline myself and drop to Sonnet for certain things. I'm trying to build that muscle in my default posture as well. Now, Meg, I know you have taken a different approach. You've taken the Pro approach. Tell us a little bit about that.
Haphazardly came to this approach and then reverse rationalized it. I have bought up a series of overage budget that I can use if I need it for my bursts. And so far, I've had mixed results. For the most part, I can do a lot of what I need to do with Pro plus orchestrating my time so that I take on certain types of things at certain times so that I know if I'm coming close to the end of my tokens that I might not take on a big project until the tokens reset or something of that nature. So I watch the meter a lot more. One thing I like about doing that is I can kind of get a better sense of the things that I'm doing and where it's blowing through tokens in a rate that I don't think is appropriate. And then I do the inverse. So I do everything cheap and then only do more if I feel like I have the need. So I do everything with Sonnet. But it can handle most of the things that I'm trying to do. And then if I get annoyed or if I don't think it's smart enough, for lack of a better word, then I switch over to Opus. So I just do the full inverse of incrementalizing how I use it.
Well, and I think that's really important. You add extra token spend when you're bursting.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So it comes up to about the same, but I feel like I'm not paying all the time. I'm making sure that I'm really using it before I pay. So it's just being cheap because I wanted to understand what was costing, where were the pivot points, and I just felt it more when it told me I had to stop. And then the other thing is I use other models. So I do have equivalent Pro version of ChatGPT. So if I'm maxing out on Claude, I throw other types of tasks over to ChatGPT for the day-to-day stuff.
And what's interesting between these 2 plans is that in the Max plan, you get a separate Sonnet bucket, whereas in Pro, you don't. The other thing that I've been playing around with is cowork versus code. So Claude Code and Claude Cowork are both on the desktop app, and you can toggle between them. And I started off with Cowork, and I loved Cowork. But Claude Code has a lot of benefits, especially if you're doing big build stuff. And in particular, Claude Code, it gives you that monitoring right there. And the biggest thing that Claude Code does is it allows you to toggle models mid-task.
Ooh, that is nice.
So for example, if I'm working through a particular episode, I use one task or one session from soup to nuts. And there are lots of things that I could do for that episode on Sonnet, but a lot of things I want to use Opus for. I used to do everything on Cowork. And for the last episode that we've been working on, I switched to Code. And so I'm playing around with going back and forth between Sonnet and Opus, and that's really cool. And then when I was building out this framework, I was asking Claude, well, what is the benefit of Cowork? Like, why would I ever use Cowork? Why don't I just use Claude Code? And it said something like, well, the UI is better and documents and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't really see much difference in the UI. But I have to say that now that I've been using Claude Code in earnest, specifically for the episode workflow, it is absolute shit at documents. And it is taking me many, many iterations of skill building to try and get it to produce a Google Doc for me. And it is making me pull out my hair. And that is something that Cowork does just automatically. Like, you don't even have to think about it. You're just like, create me a document, and it like gives you a little pill and you open it in Google Docs, and it's great. And Claude Code was like running for 26 minutes trying to figure out how to do this. And I'm like, stop!
Yeah.
You have to stop doing this. Like, oh my God.
I think this is what Ethan Malik calls the spikiness of this, where like it does like hard things amazingly, and then like some stupid little thing you like, what the heck?
The other thing that I think is really interesting is the throttle on the effort level. And that's, again, something you can do in Claude Code and not necessarily Cowork. So in Cowork, you choose your model and that's it for your entire task. But in Claude Code, you can throttle the levels all the way from low all the way to extra high. I can tell that it does annoying things and takes a really long time sometimes, but I don't know if that's really because of the effort level. I think it's because of the spikiness issue. And so then I have like a couple of examples here of like types of work and what sort of model and effort is maybe recommended. If you're doing deep reasoning across multiple tasks all at once, then that's really a big burst. And so probably one of the best pieces of advice is to not do lots of deep reasoning in parallel, which is probably better for my nervous system regulation as well. Yeah. Let's talk about your enterprise token budgeting strategy. But first, how about if we change costumes?
I think that's a great idea. Now for something completely different.
There's lots of news of companies that are running out of token prematurely. And then there's just all sorts of surprise and shock and awe. But nobody really seems to have a good grasp on what to do about this situation other than just like shut it down.
Fire it up, shut it down, right? Yes.
First off, what are the buckets of usage and budget that you need to be thinking about? They were cost of sales, internal IT costs, and AI initiatives. And I thought this was a really cool way that you laid it out. And so I wanted you to just briefly talk through each of those and how you need to think about them.
I have been pondering this for a while because I've had the fortune or misfortune of running large clouds and having things metered and understanding how quickly the numbers can get away from you. I was pretty clear we had a big problem on our hands. And as typically happens, once I'm sure of that, I start asking other people. And when I realized this, nobody else thought we had a big problem on our hands. How that looks for your actual business growth was really important in my mind. Even back before we left SuccessFactors, asking the question, how do we pay for the AI and how do we deliver capability over above that? Because it doesn't have the same cost structure as traditional software. So getting our head around what is the cost of sales piece, what is the delivery piece, and how that impacts unit economics for your product and also the overall growth metrics for your business. Most people in the software development lifecycle don't really have a good intuition for the unit economics of their business. What people tend to do is just assume certain things based on past patterns, and knowing that this pattern isn't going to fit anymore. It's clear to me we need to build better intuition for this. So cost of sales was an obvious one for me, where the customer acquisition cost was going to be different and the cost of delivery was going to be different. And most people probably didn't have a full appreciation or understanding of that. And we're just looking at what is the competitive pressure to have capability, et cetera.
What are examples of tokens being used for cost of sales?
There's a couple layers. So customer acquisition, you're probably going to put in some AI tooling to maybe have fewer SDRs. And then maybe you're going to add some forward deploy engineers to try to help customers understand how to use your product. Both of those are different cost levers than used to exist in your customer acquisition cost bucket. And so depending on the size and scale of that for you, that could be material. Maybe it's a net benefit, maybe it's not, but you should know. And then there's the delivery cost. So say your product has some AI capability in it, and underneath the covers, you are paying Anthropic to deliver that for your customer. Those costs don't scale the same as past software costs. They tend to be much more variable. So where in the past, a SaaS business might have had an 80% margin, most of these token-based products often have closer to 50 or 60% margin, and in some cases can be almost upside down. So understanding how your customers are going to use tokens that you have to pay for to deliver your service.
And right now, a lot of those tokens are subsidized. And
exactly. So even trying to figure out what is a fair price is very, very hard.
I was talking to somebody who, in the early days of using like Amazon Web Services, they, had a very low cost basis. And then a couple of years later, it was like in the tens of millions, right? It just skyrocketed. So there is a parallel there, I think, right?
Absolutely. And this is why it's so visible to me, because when we migrated SuccessFactors over to public cloud, our cost structure changed dramatically. When you've had to really watch this margin story, you tend to not forget. But most people have not had that experience of seeing that full line of sight and having accountability to trying to manage both growth and margin at the same time.
Okay, so that's cost of sales.
That's cost of sales,
okay,
right?
The second one is internal IT costs.
It is clear that there is benefit for every employee in your organization to have access to AI to do their job more efficiently. There is a cost increase that should be able to be captured with better efficiency overall for workers in your company. And I really am nervous that people are going to throw out the baby with the bathwater and say only certain groups can use. And that's not helpful. There are certain AI use that do need to be available to the broader population, do need to be governed in such a way that you're not just incenting people perversely to spend a lot of tokens that are not adding value to their work, but are just generally open the same way you would give employees access to Google or a cell phone or whatever else, a laptop to do their work. And so I encourage companies to think of it like giving every employee access to Excel. It belongs to everybody. Everybody should have access to it. And you should think in terms of how you govern spend in a way to get the right kind of efficiency, but don't overmanage that.
Yeah, I guess the one real difference there is that Excel was predictable and this maybe isn't. And so how do you have governors on there?
What people can get on the $20 a month is probably generally useful to everyone.
Even if the foundation model companies don't provide it, you could still do it internally, and it would be a pattern that people would be familiar with.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
That's right.
So the last one is AI initiatives.
And this is where our conversation with Charlene comes so much into play, right? You should pick one or two. They should be big. You should go after them in a big way. You should not limit how you use tokens to get to those results. You should manage and watch both the cost and the results in concert with each other. So this is where you want to allow for creativity and maybe even some waste of tokens in service of achieving big outcomes towards your strategic goals. If you've got line of sight to both, you will know if you're getting the mix right. And I don't think you need to over constrain it day one. I think you just need to build in the discipline of watching what are the value we're getting, what is it costing us? And so you can tune as you go. But everybody that's working on those initiatives would be caring about both of those metrics. They should benefit with some of the spoils of whatever they produce, right? Like turn everybody into having a stake in whatever is the big result of that AI initiative. I would go in big, but be sure and make the things that you're watching and learning from not just be the technical bits, but also the cost bits as well.
And so you had 3 pieces of guidance, small number of specific initiatives, track costs ruthlessly. And then the third one is directionally correct metrics, which makes complete sense. But elsewhere in your article, you also talked about Goodhart's law and the risks of bad measures.
I find people get stuck on a couple dimensions here, which is why I like to talk about them as directionally correct versus completely accurate. And I think in order to embrace a directionally correct metric, you have to be willing to let go absolute precision. You probably cannot get full specificity of how much of the AI tokens were applied for this project versus this other project. You're going to do the best you can, but there's going to be some people that work on both, or there's going to be some bleed over between all of it. And like people will get really worked up over that. A directionally correct metric would say we're going to make some coarse-grained assumptions in places we cannot get precise data. We're going to start watching that, figuring out in parallel, like where our assumptions were wrong and how we can get better data. And so this is where you really do have to lean in a little bit on the discomfort of not knowing, but investing in asking yourself the question, what would be some indicators that this was working? And what are some ways that I would understand this to be working from other sources than just what I'm doing here today? And this is where you have to really be creative, because there isn't going to be any patterns to follow, but the creativity is not haphazard.
All right, Meg. Thank you for your TED Talk. I am so much more informed now. People are needing this this seminar. So thank you for sharing. All right, everyone. That was token budgeting. Now on to Leadership Corner. We're going to do this one a little bit differently. I recently went on a walk with a product friend, and actually it inspired me to write an article about this person's dilemma, but I wanted to talk about it here as well. Does that sound good, Meg?
I love it. And it is a beautiful article. So remind me what the title is of this article.
A love letter to product managers. This is your moment. Don't blow it.
Don't blow it. I love it.
And it was a contentious argument between Claude and I whether to say don't blow it or don't fuck it up.
Oh, and which team were you on?
Well, I originally said don't fuck it up, but then Claude insisted that LinkedIn would be much more amenable to don't blow it up. So
that's probably good advice, but I feel like also don't fuck it up is clear, and clear is kind. So
here's the dilemma. A seasoned product manager at a great company, but his role was quietly shrinking and the work wasn't necessarily what he loved. His dev team was too buried delivering the roadmap to necessarily experiment with AI. And despite all of his pushing, it just wasn't happening. And so his dilemma was, I think I need a new job. What should I do? So when this individual brought this forward, it was not the first time that I'd heard this. It usually starts with me saying, hey, you need to get AI curious and start building. And they usually say, but I don't have time for that. And I feel a lot of empathy because, of course, I do not have a full-time, super busy job like they do. And putting myself in their shoes when I did have a big full-time busy job, it would have been really hard to do. But the fact of the matter is that this is by far the most important thing that you can do for yourself and your career and even your company, to be quite honest. But you got to make the time. You got to figure out what's going to drop, what you're going to deprioritize, and you got to put some energy into this. The other thing that I realized in talking with this person is that they didn't really feel like they knew what was possible. It didn't occur to them that they could be a builder. They were thinking of AI as something that could help them do their current job a little bit better, but they didn't see what was possible in terms of expanding what a product manager could be, what that role really meant going forward. And that's what I think is so important. That's the big unlock here. Yes, everything's changing and you need to change with it. And it's also just really super cool and exciting in the way that you can do it. A couple of revelations that we had in this conversation that I think are worth drawing out. One is that getting set up, I think, is one of the biggest barriers, both physically as well as emotionally, because historically, these are tools, these are capabilities that were available to developers and not to product managers. And you feel like you need technical people to help you get set up in the first place. But the reality is that AI can help you with that. And that is something, again, that people don't really realize. Because he was thinking like, oh, there's like this onboarding document for new developers that I could look through and, set it up myself. And I said, why don't you feed that to Claude and have Claude figure out what needs to be done and do some of it and walk you through the rest? And he was like, whoa, that's crazy. The other thing that has been good is having setup parties. So like having like a whole bunch of product managers working together, maybe with like a developer or somebody who's done it already. So that's another way. You don't need to be the expert at setting it up. Don't feel bad about like actually outsourcing that to AI. The other thing that was really interesting was that in addition to looking at ways to automate his own job, whether that was, helping getting writing in terms of building specs or in terms of writing user guides or, what have you, it was also guiding developers to be able to do that, to do some of that PM work for themselves to avoid some of the PM bottlenecks, but hadn't really thought about, I could really expanding the developer role. He had that in his mind because he knew what PMs do, but he hadn't thought like, I can like break down this wall of what's possible for me to do. And then the last thing was kind of back to the time because, he was starting to spend a couple hours a day looking for a new job. And I think this is the case of a lot of product managers right now that are feeling stuck and feeling like they need to grow and that they need to go somewhere else to do that. But stop doing that and take those hours and apply them to your own learning, your own building, your own joy with where you are right now. What advice would you add?
There's a lot of really powerful things you put in there that I believe strongly. So the one about no time. Procrastination is a signal. And I think the truth is that there is limited time, but we all prioritize based on what we decide matters for us. And when you're enthusiastic about something or when you have no choice about something, you make the time. The minute that your response is, I don't have the time, what you're telling me is this is not a priority. And so back to this being a little bit of tough love, I can appreciate that you think it's not a priority, but recognizing that your job is becoming less and less valuable for the company, then you're creating your own exit plan. Back to the taking agency and owning this end to end for yourself. It's hard, but it's better than being at the mercy of someone else. So if it is the case that you want to go find another job, then I would still ask you the question, how are you going to be relevant for another job if you don't already have these skills?
Exactly. Yeah.
How are you going to be somebody that people want to hire when the majority of companies are going through this? So you'll probably end up in the same pattern again in another organization.
And that was my Uber advice was this is about storytelling. This is about building your stories because once you start to get into the AI tools and you start building your own stuff and you start learning and unlearning and documenting what's interesting, you are just bursting with stories. And those are the stories that are going to get you the next job. And I don't just mean the job that you want at Anthropic in their product division, which of course is what everyone wants, but it could be another job within your own company or just a new assignment or whatever it is. It is the building of those stories that is going to make you an absolute differentiated success.
And then the point about the lack of imagination of what the job could be. I think this is a very, very important one. And this is a place where we get really stuck. This is not a failing of an individual person. This is actually a cognitive glitch. And so the only way you break out of that cognitive glitch is to force yourself to unwind a little bit of the things that you're holding to be true before you start with the journey of what can I work on or what can I do. And so what I loved about your approach, Amy, was you pulled the thread and made it clear that two choices, that at the end of the day, we need builders, and you can be an engineer that expands into product, or you can be a product that expands into engineering. But we are going to see these roles broadening, and that should look like opportunity for all of us. But it only looks like opportunity if you are capable of imagining and understanding that. So this is where, when I talk about the fact that every one of us should be figuring out how to make our current job obsolete and define what that future job should look like. Because if we don't make ourselves obsolete in our current job, we will prove ourselves to be obsolete through natural selection. And so your point about don't fuck it up, don't blow it is very important here, because this is happening whether you're contributing or not. And so it's either this great opportunity to reimagine how you can contribute, or it's an opportunity for you to recognize that your relevance and your skills are just not that valuable anymore. So you can get ahead of this by putting yourself in the driver's seat. That's what I loved about your advice. And I think it applies to most roles. It's just really easy to see in the product engineering lifecycle right now because there is so much momentum that every single organization is leaning in to this moment. So we want that for all of you. We want you to do fabulous things. We want you to be able to do bigger and more interesting things. And we want you to grow as humans and also to help others grow with you. So read Amy's article. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've given the same advice to product managers who are not currently employed as well. And I've also been really tickled by a number of product leaders that reached out after I posted the article about what they're doing with their teams already or because of the article in general. It is also just a really important thing for leaders to help create the headspace and the motivation as well.
I loved your idea of doing a party. Like, bring somebody with you along the way so you're not, a single person trying to figure it out, but you've got multiple brains collaborating on it. It's super helpful. And it's also more fun. It's always more fun to go together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think we nailed that one, Amy. What do you think?
Woo, I'm exhausted.
Yeah, well, we've been doing a lot of building.
A lot of sense making.
Thank you to everyone. Please tell a friend. Let's invent the future together, everyone. I believe in us.
Let's make every day count.